previously. I thank you for very informative and interesting input, of course. And you can all ask questions again, and the procedure is the same. You raise your hand, and you get microphone from assistant. And if you ask question, please say your name and what is your connection with the topic. So anybody already? Okay, you, Triin, please. Okay, please microphone, because otherwise the translators don't hear you.
Thank you so much. I'm Triin Ulla. I'm coming from Tallinn University and Archimedes Foundation Youth Agency. And I have so many affiliations to this topic, but I'm gonna talk something about part of it tomorrow. So I'm gonna use the opportunity to ask my Estonian colleague here, because it's you were mentioning the priority of Estonian instruction as a second language, and you went over it pretty quickly. It's like, yeah, it is also important, and it's a priority, and we have to prepare teachers, and we have to prepare materials, and so on. And it's not a new topic. It's not a new challenge. It's quite. I mean, it's been at the center of the debate for, I don't know, 10 years at least, if not more, right? But it's been in the spotlight, I would say, during the past year for me personally, especially since summer, that we actually would need to make language immersion and acquiring Estonian language for the Russian-speaking youth more and more accessible. There are many parties who make also this central claim that we should bring more quality instruction to the Russian language schools, and also make Estonian language instruction accessible since kindergarten. So these are the real, like the realistic developments in the policy at this instant. Well, my teaching experience comes from the being a teacher at a Russian language school, so with teaching in Estonian, of course, but in a school with Russian as the main language. And also being active now in teacher training at the Tallinn University. So I have the courage to say that our resources at this point for these policy directions are not good enough. So now I would like to use the opportunity to ask you from your point of view, from your institution, the Ministry of Education and Science, how ready are you for these developments, these potential developments, and what is your stance and your view on it?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think that one of the things, and I guess that it is even more important than the resources, is that we, in cuisine, they very often today say that we have reinvent and deconstruct pavlova cake and do stuff like that. I think that one of the things to be done with the language, and Estonian as the second language as well, is to depolitize the language, so that it is not this much about, this is not this much a political issue. And when it is said that we do not have enough resources, then I would say that we live in Estonia, we have the language environment here. The bigger question is whether the teachers who are at school today, or whether the people who are studying the language, whether they are willing to make use of the language environment that we have here and make use of the resources that we have here. If we speak about, for example, the textbooks, then I believe, I used to be an English teacher, and I have never ever met a textbook that will satisfy all my needs as a teacher. The same refers to the Estonian language materials, that we can keep developing new textbooks, but at the same time, we have abundant, rich resources, media, everything. It's a question of how to make use of them.
Where do we get the teachers from? That's my question. I don't care about materials so much, but questions.
Just as a moderator, I understand it's a very important topic, but just keep in general. So I would like to hear other reflections also maybe on this topic. So if you don't mind,
I'm going to give away the microphone. Where are you? Microphone.
Put down your passion. So yes, keep.
Continue with the same question. So we in Latvia just finished what you are asking about Estonia. At the same time, I want to continue what my Estonian colleague said, and actually we saw example in Germany before when capital city moved from Bonn to Berlin. There were many dissatisfied people. The fact is, if office moves, it doesn't matter whether a person wants or not. Office moves. So if we make school reform and we close some schools in countryside down and we open some new schools in a suburban area of capital city up, then that's a decision because it's a question of agglomeration, of number of the people. So then it's the question that actually when you start a reform, then you give certain period of transition. In Latvian case, the language reform which we started in 2014 on diminishing this 60-40 quota that 60% of the language should be instructed in Latvian and 40 in Russian. Now, since 1919, starting from from grade 1 to grade 5, it will be cut from 1919 and from the higher up to the the eldest graders, and then the youngers, it will be coming up till 2021. So we've given a transition period, and we've said that there will be funding enough for that. So there are obviously many representatives, particularly from non-Latvian schools who are instructing in Russian. They are not happy, but at the same time, we've given them certain timeline. We've said that funding is there. It's promised into the 3-year budget framework. So that's it. We cannot immediately give you that the plan is ready, but giving you transition period and 3-year budget time frame, I think it should be enough for any sensible person.
Discuss it later because it's a very important topic, of course. Okay, I see hand, but any more reflection? Vilma, you're in teacher education. How can you comfort about studying materials and textbooks and how do you manage?
This is a long discussion that we've been having in Lithuania since we made the same political decisions. But I think that 13 minutes is not enough to actually come to a consensus or agreement, because there are too many factors to listen to and to consider. In Lithuania, we actually have had that transition period, and we are increasing even the hours of other subjects in the Lithuanian languages in national minority schools. But this is absolutely my subjective personal opinion. When I have discussions in my country, I often ask audience or colleagues, what problems do we solve? Are we solving the adults' problems? Or are we solving the children's problems who are going to live in the future, and their future depends a lot on their language and their skills that they will get to live, in this case, in Lithuania. So if your children, if you are of other national, ethnic, or language background, decide to live and build career in Lithuania, how would they survive, do you think? Because as we all agreed, higher education is in the national language. You wouldn't enter a university without good academic level language skills. So this is not to undermine the cultures and the languages. This is to make sensible decisions to help young people to build their future in the way they want it. They can go even to international schools if they decide, but parents decide that, to go to a British university and ignore both languages, home language and national language, and just go for English. But this is the decision of the parents. So parents and educators and policymakers have to put children first.
Okay.
Because if we base decisions on our past or on our present, we disadvantage the children for the future. That's my comment.
That's true. But as a practitioner, you face these challenges every day. Is this handbooks and materials, how you overcome this challenge, these practical tools, how to obtain these?
Yeah, well, we've got it a bit easier since typically at the age of 1 year, none children speak any language. So without joking, the daycare centers or kindergartens try to help the children to get in a basic proficiency in German, and depending on the languages of the educators, they also can help in developing other languages. But aside from some explicitly bilingual kindergartens, this depends more or less on chance. If the language of a child or family matches with one of the educators, and the concentration is, like I try to say, on the same chance in learning German. I found it interesting when you mentioned that Latvian families don't want to send their children in a Russian kindergarten. From our perspective, it would be much more problematic if there were some non-German speaking kindergartens, if German speaking families would send their children there, since the kindergartens are the possibilities for for children who don't learn German at home to get this proficiency at the kindergarten. So I think it would be a great idea for Latvian children to go to Russian kindergarten to learn the two languages. It's more problematic, but it's I think it's more doubtful if it helps if Russian children are in the Russian kindergarten and pass on the chance to learn Latvian.
Okay, may I take the next question? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Tibrock. I'm from the U.S. Embassy here in Tallinn, and we've been talking a lot today about, we've been focusing on national minorities, but I want to shift for a moment to national majorities, if I can, and ask you what you think the responsibility is, or how policymakers can help prepare the national majority to participate in a multicultural community as well.
For everybody, the question?
Yeah, for everybody.
Maybe start from parliament, same member, so as a politician.
Former Simon member.
Oh, former, okay.
Yes, so answer is rather simple. If we follow the major charters and conventions which exist at the UN and EU level, then they don't give you much of the way of aberration. So therefore, the thing is, if you look on majority, the language levels, look on the EU charts where the Baltic states are predominantly at amongst the first 6 together with Benelux and Swiss. So there is ability to speak proficiently at least 2 to 3 languages amongst the Baltic majority populations. So I don't think that there is much to be added. Actually, most of the European big countries, actually, I mean, Germany, Spain, Turkey, France, could learn from Baltic states, actually. This is something we can really teach to these big European nations.
Okay, maybe Piret, what is it?
Well, I think that when you speak about unified schools, so just changing to the Estonian language instruction schools, then definitely we have to realize that there are fears on both sides. So that both the parents of minority children are sort of worried about how it's going to work, and just the same way the majority parents are worried. So that the fears are real, and the fears of both parties are to be addressed. So we shouldn't hide and say that it will just go smoothly for both parties. I guess that the Estonian parents are also worried when they have children that are different in their schools or classes, but these are the fears that come with inclusive education anyway. So when you speak about handicapped children or children with disabilities, so that these fears are there in any case. So, and this work is to be done.
So you agree?
Yeah.
You know that. So do you want to add?
Exactly the same. Yes. Many of our institutions, not limited to education, but education institutions as well, are developed historically developed from a very limited perspective. German, non-migrant, middle class. It's a limited perspective, and the majority of the society, or maybe even the parents, still tends to think in terms of normal children and other children. In every aspect I mentioned, able-bodied, normal, different. And like you said, it's a question of inclusion to learn that this is not a difference that makes any sense, and to adapt to individual needs and individual capabilities.
And Vilma, in connection with majority responsibilities and the fears we have mentioned a lot of time, and how in Lithuania how we can take this responsibility as a majority.
I would like to add another aspect to this. I absolutely agree that the majority has to go forward anyway. When you are a majority, you have more power and in decision makings. Also, even in democratic processes, you can win easier. But the aspect that I would like to add is, and probably this is a topic to expand further in all political debates, is the status of the languages. I think that investments in language education are not fair, and investments in teaching the languages are not fair because we invest in languages that have higher status. And those are usually international languages of commerce, of communication, of international relations. But we, majority, I would agree, majority is not often willing to invest in minority languages to make the neighborhood more friendly. And again, if you go back to the childhood, you would remember that when you run in the streets, you don't know the status of the language of your friend. You learn the language to communicate and be friendly. So I think that's a lesson for policymakers to learn from children in terms of minority languages.
Okay, thank you all. And we have, I see a hand. Yes, say your name and affiliation.
Hello, I'm Margarita, and I'm presenting the Estonia 2200 political party. And I would like to ask about the balance in the mean of Estonian language, for example, or Latvian language, and this multiculturalism, what we're talking about. That is it balance today, or do we have to develop more this language skills in all levels, or do we? Which is our priority now? Do we nowadays concentrate too much on one language, the state language? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just, as a moderator, ask you keep it short, and and this is our last question. But here, Piret, maybe make a round.
The answer is in the Constitution. So that definitely the priority and the meaning of all the essence of the state is the state language. So definitely it is the priority, and at the same time we would like everybody who lives here to have the chance to know the state language in order to function, in order to be competitive, in order to be mobile, and in order to have communication. Because, well, I guess that the line very often, the most important factor when it comes into communication when it comes to mutual understanding, the line is the language. And if we do not share the language, then it's very difficult to, speak about integration or issues like that.
Thank you.
Latvia is pretty much the same case. If you look in Latvian constitution back from 1922, then the state language is there, but also protection of minorities is there. So it's absolutely essential that we protect minority languages. Minority languages have their schools. The latest reform of 2014, which started and was supported by all minority schools except some of these non-Latvian Russian schools, because I don't want to use term Russian speaker, because I'm Russian speaker as well, but I have nothing to do with Kremlin's policies. And this is a term which is being concocted in Kremlin, actually, and we've been using it very frivolously, sometimes without thinking what does it mean. But to answer your question, yes, a state language is there, as Lithuanian colleague quite correctly said. If you want to have sensible development for the kid in foreseeable future, you invest in a sensible language policy, which could be instructed in school and later in university or in vocational school. But at the same time, respect for minority languages is there in constitution, and nothing can change it except the referenda. And referenda, in Latvian case, you need 2/3 of the votes, and it's almost impossible to get. So we saw it in 2012 when there was a language referendum of granting Russia a second language status. 86% of the Latvian population said no.
Okay, that's it.
Actually, I have the question. You understood a little bit wrong.
We have a lot
I meant
of
that
time.
there should be more English.
Microphone, yes, but
Maybe there should be more English.
Why not Chinese? Why not Chinese? German?
I'm sorry,
Swedish?
we don't have time for follow-up, but it's very interesting. I'm sorry. It's, but about this one language policy, that was also a very important aspect, and of course a follow-up, but we don't have as much time to address this. But since Lithuania and Germany, Caritas, what are your comments about?
I love the answers here, so as we are sisters, I wouldn't
Okay,
have
you agree.
answered differently. So.
Okay, so I agree. It's kept it very short. Okay, but you have listened, colleagues from Baltic states. So, as a practitioner from Caritas Center, how do you feel about these policies in one language?
I
Policies.
think that goes over my competence to comment on the situation in the Baltic states, on which I practically know nothing. No, the situation is quite different, as you have another tradition of minority languages, another strength of another part, or a bigger part of the population that actually uses another language than the state language in everyday life. And yes, I think it's an interesting and sensible approach presented, but I don't have to add anything. But thank you for asking.
Okay, so I would wrap it up. So this, what you have said, that of course we must value our national state language and keeping policy that values although multicultural diversity, and also your very beautiful slide in practice what we teachers can actually do to address these values. So I think it's very nice wrap up all this panel. So thank you very much your presentations and also your active participation, and we have now coffee break. Okay.